we're having a baby. Yeah, I've got a baby on the way. I mean, like, not a new car, this is a human child is to be birthed soon, and it's mine. I mean, together with my wife. Normally, when I introduce something new to the channel, I'll be like, welcome to the Porsche Macan Turbo. But today I kind of don't know where to start. Obviously, the car guys here are probably like, well, tell us about the car. But also, I feel like I kind of owe it to you guys to tell you about the situation, because while the content on the channel is obviously sort of strictly about the cars and the travel and the wider lifestyle, this is a really big deal. I'm having a baby. Now, normally I'm very used to talking about cars. I don't really know what to say in this situation. I've been overwhelmed for the last sort of 7 months. The due date is the end of January, so I don't know what I'm going to end up doing then. Any dads out there, or any new dads out there, if you got any tips or expectations, let me know. So just before we go into the baby thing, let's talk about the car. So you might have seen that the RS6 is for sale / sold. I'm not sure if it's sold yet or not, depending on when this video goes out, but we've got a lot of people inquiring about that car. There's a reason why the RS6 is going as well, and it's because there's a baby coming. Now hear me out, you're probably thinking, whoa, that's like the ultimate dad car. And I agree, it's amazing. However, as a family car, unfortunately, my wife doesn't want to drive it. So, which is really strange, because she likes performance, she likes going quickly, but she finds that the RS6 is, or particularly my spec, is a little bit too manly for her. She just thinks it's too big, it's a bit too aggressive, and she just doesn't like driving it, which is weird, I know. But that's one of the reasons, in fact, it's probably the main reason it's going. I had dreams of it being like the ultimate dad car, and then when I found out that my wife didn't want to drive it, yeah, it kind of put a downer on that, on top of all of the other things that I spoke about with regards to it becoming a higher mileage car, and also with there being a new RS6 out soon. Perhaps we'll spec one of those more unisex vibe, so that she doesn't mind driving one in future. But the other thing is that she said it's predominantly because it's too big. And I was like, well, it's going to have to be fairly big, because all of a sudden we've got to think about stuff like prams and all of the gear that comes along with having a baby. And friends that I've spoken to are like, you will not believe how much stuff you have when you have a child. I'm used to right now just walking out of the door with phone, wallet, keys, and a camera, and getting on with it. And they're like, you have no idea what's about to happen. The stuff you're going to have to bring along with you will change the car that you use regularly. And my wife was like, I'm not sure I really want to drive that bigger car. And so it really narrowed down the choice of cars pretty quickly, because she still wanted something with performance. She loves cars. So for those of you guys that don't know, my wife and myself, we work alongside each other. And I often get questions like, you know, all of this traveling you're doing, you must have a very understanding wife because you're leaving her at home all of this time. Little known fact, I would say 90% of the journeys that I'm on, she's also there. So sometimes she's actually literally behind the camera, and sometimes holds the camera. But if not, she's often doing work with the brands, like alongside the brands we're working with, or just helping out with the logistics of Mr. JWW as a whole. So she comes from a background that she just loves performance cars. And so we had this issue where we were like, we don't want a big car, but we want a car that's small with performance, but it's still going to have a lot of practicality. And when you start looking down the list of cars, there's not actually that many. And so you might be wondering, well, what was your journey like shopping around for these different cars? She and I were both like, what about a Macan? You know, like it's a Porsche, it has this performance ethos about it, and fairly practical. So we went and looked at one, and then I test drove a Turbo, which I enjoyed. And then my dealer, which is Stratstone Porsche Winslow, gave me the keys to a Performance. So it's a Macan Turbo Performance, which means it's had around about 40 brake horsepower upgrade, more torque, larger disc brakes. It comes with Porsche's PASM, the Porsche Active Stability Management Control. As soon as I turned a wheel in this thing, I was like, you know what? Like, this is for me. This, I really enjoy it. And while predominantly it is my wife who's going to be using the car, it's actually a family car. So this is a car that I too will also be driving. And of course, being the dad that I will be, I'm gonna want something that I'm still gonna enjoy driving, whether the kid's in it or not. And I drove this thing, I drove it pretty swift, and I was just blown away by the ability of something with what looks like having high center of gravity. It just doesn't feel like it. It feels incredible. In fact, I was comparing it immediately with the RS6 because that's the car that was leaving in replacement of this car. Now, granted, in a straight line, it's not as fast as the RS6. RS6 is pushing out just over 600 horsepower, 605 horsepower. This is around about 440 with the performance pack. So it is down on power, but we got to remember, this isn't the predominant reason for this car. Yes, we want it to be agile and dynamic, but we're going to have a little baby, and we don't want to give it whiplash from day one. So it has enough performance for the dad to enjoy himself when maybe the kid isn't in the car. If I want to immerse myself in a full driver's experience, let's face it, this isn't necessarily the car that I'm going to pick. But as in terms of a whole package, with something that ticks all of the boxes, this is really leaning towards what I imagined. Now, speaking of what I imagined, I've never had to imagine this scenario ever before. I mean, I've never really had the need for any back seats, really. It's nice to have it from a practicality side of things, but it's never been essential. Now it's essential, and is the boot. Now, the dealership, so Anthony, who actually sold me my Porsche GT3, has been amazing. So Anthony at Stratstone, he actually brought down a Macan demonstrator for me and my wife to drive, which was very, very cool. But it wasn't until I opened the boot and realized that he'd put his own baby gear inside for us to see how it all fits, that I was like, man, now that is extra level salesman detail. He's very clever, but it's also like legit informative demo of this car. This is stuff I never had to think about before. Like things like ISOFIX in the back. I'm gonna have to be dealing with baby seats. Baby seats! So you might be wondering, you know, what does this mean for the channel? Well, if anything, you know, friends and family have been like, you know, are you gonna take a step back? You've got this baby now. My eyes, it's actually the opposite. I've got this baby now, or I've got this baby coming now, which means if anything, I'm gonna have to turn it up even further. I've got somebody else that relies on me. This has never been a factor in my life before. So for me, I actually want to up the game. So there's gonna be developments coming on the channel soon where we can up the game together. I wanna be able to provide you guys with more content off the back of the F12 TDF drive, more quality content. I would love to bring videos like that to you more regularly. So there's things coming which I'm hoping will sort of bolster this channel and sort of grow the community even stronger, because all of a sudden I'm going to be supercar dad. Now, not that I'm going to be parading my child across the internet anytime soon, but I would be interested to hear from you guys if you want to see that side of things in terms of the dad's experience of living with cars. I'm not sure if the supercar dad thing has ever been done before. Once again, never anything I've ever had to research, but all of a sudden I'm going to be putting a seat in a TDF. Now, I've discovered that the TDF doesn't have ISOFIX, so there's different setups and arrangements if you do want to take a child along in that kind of car. Now, the kid isn't going to be in the car straight away. Super little young baby, not due until the end of January, and even then, let's face it, I'm not going to be sticking it in a pretty intense supercar anytime soon. But that journey will take place, and I'd love to hear from you guys to see if you would like to see an element of that. Don't worry, this is not going to become a baby channel by any stretch. But ultimately, this is a new part of my life, and I do, to a degree, share my life with you guys, and I'm wondering, you know, how much of it would you like to see? So comments below, I'd love to know. There's a whole new world. Now, a little bit about the car. I've actually had this car for 2 months now. I haven't announced it, obviously, because I was waiting to save it for the baby announcement. Macan Turbo, performance no less. Now, once again, something else that ticked the box for me, and I know I talk about this all the time, twin clutch gearbox in a car like this. My first Macan experience, and this is weird how things kind of come around at full circle. I did a Porsche experience day at Silverstone. So Porsche have their own sort of Silverstone experience center there, where if you're a Porsche owner or a prospect, you can go and experience the Porsche range on various different handling circuits, track, off-road, etc. And it was the first time that I'd driven a Macan there. Now, you know, I always bang on about gearboxes and how great gearboxes are. And then I drove a platform like this, which is this four-wheel drive, practical, 5-seater, big boot, by convention, fairly large car, but not too big, importantly, for the wife. And I was blown away by its handling. We took it on a handling circuit. The change of direction in this thing is incredible. It's still, I mean, okay, it's not the last word in steering feel, but you know what the front wheels are doing. But the gearbox together, now what I love, if you put this thing into Sport Plus, the suspension stiffens up, it gets sort of taut on its toes, steering weight feels weightier as a result of those changes in the dampers, and of course the valves in the exhaust open up. So if we drop it down a few cogs, on the way that this thing reacts, it's already, yeah, it pulls, man. Listen to it. Oh wow, it's so good. And when you anchor on the brakes, I love how all of the weight transfers on that front, because you can really turn it in under braking still. This is something I've never experienced from a 4x4 before, but just the way it goes, it's got such a thick swell of torque. Now I want to talk about the turbo moniker which has been applied to the Macan. So when you read the words Porsche and turbo, you quite rightly associate it with the Porsche Turbo, which is famously applied in the platform, which is the 911 Turbo. Now, in the 911 platform, Porsche apply the use of a turbo in a very different way. It is all about just raw, pure speed, massive pace gathering waft. In this car, it's weird because you approach it and you read Porsche Turbo and you think, wow, this is going to be a similar performance application to a 911 Porsche Turbo. But after a few miles in it, you realize that the turbo application in this is very different to that in a 911 Turbo. Turbo in this makes it just absolutely effortless to drive. It just has such an ease about it, the way that it goes down the road. And I've likened this to other cars in the past which are heavily turbocharged but from the luxury sector. So take a Rolls-Royce, for example, the Phantom, which has the V12 in it. That, once again, heavily turbocharged engine, but the application of that turbo just makes it a very effortless, easy drive. And I've likened it to as if there's a magnet on the front of the car and there's a magnet on the other side of the road just drawing you down the road. That's kind of how this thing feels. You look down and you've built this momentum with like absolutely no effort at all. And then look, you can turn it in on corners like this and it just eats tarmac. It's so cool. What I'm not used to is having the agility in a car like this. You walk over to it and of course you approach it with a very different mindset that you're gonna get in this thing and chill and kind of take it easy. But as soon as you interact with the brakes, which bite wonderfully, you change down with that twin clutch gearbox, which if you've ever experienced a Porsche twin clutch gearbox, it appears that it doesn't matter what it's in, it's incredible. And then at the same time, you literally have the pram in the back. Not that I've had to experience that just yet, but that's what this thing's all about. So yes, that's why we bought a Porsche Macan Turbo Performance, and the RS6 is going. That's also one of the reasons why I kind of don't mind. It's such a new chapter in my life. Everything's new. Once I was sat in this car and I wrapped my head around the purpose of why I've got it, everything changed. You know, I was like, okay, I have to think about this as not for performance reasons. This is to ferry my child around the world. I mean, I say the world. Hopefully I get on some road trips at some point. Let's see. Of course, there will be more specific content coming on the Macan Turbo soon, but this is more of a sort of, hey, by the way, update. As colossal as it is, yeah, I can run over the full specs and show you much more of the outside of the car soon. But right now, there's this mind-blowing moment that's going on, which I kind of felt the need to share with you guys. So, as always, leave your comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I shall see you next time for some non-baby related news, and we'll